Hello, Canada. Welcome on into Good Night, Qatar. Jordan, we can always count on your jazz hands. That's Jordan Wilson, Oliver Platt. Joining us from Qatar is Kristian Jack. KJ, we're going to come right on into you because you were there for the final game of the day, I should say, and that would be Portugal-Uruguay. Good little battle here. We were expecting, I at least was expecting a high-scoring game. Portugal does walk away with the victory. Bruno Fernandes gets the brace. He gives them the 6 points that they need, KJ, to officially clinch. What did you make of this affair between these two sides?
Well, it was a really good game. I came away very impressed with Portugal because they've got a lot of visionaries on this pitch, and I've watched a lot of teams here. Been very blessed to do that. I can't think of too many other more intelligent sides in attack. I think Argentina don't really have a plan. They just play the Messi, and Brazil are all a lot of energy and quality, but I wouldn't necessarily describe them as supremely intelligent from deep positions. But when you've got Bernardo Silva, Ruben Neves, Bruno Fernandes, João Felix, and then of course Ronaldo on the end of all that, we're a really, really fun team to watch. We're a dangerous attacking team. And I keep thinking about how Ronaldo of old in Portugal was really kind of so dependent on him, and now it's not just about him. And if it becomes about him, I think they're in trouble. So I think it's one of those where he has to learn to trust them. And I watched him closely tonight on the pitch, Ollie, and you can see that his body language is good. All the talk coming into the World Cup was about issues with Manchester United and disharmony. They look very harmonious right now. His touches were excellent. And he looks like a player at the moment who's fully happy with what's going on. I know they rode their luck a bit and Uruguay changed the shape and they got better, but I was very impressed with Portugal as an attacking unit in this one.
Yeah, I've been impressed by them as well. And I think the best news for Portugal, and I don't mean this as a knock on Ronaldo, I just think this is the stage he's at his career now. But Bruno Fernandes looks like their best player, their most important player. For me, that is great news for Portugal because that is the guy that really, along with Bernardo Silva, who's exceptional as well, this team should be built around. So Bruno's been one of the best players in the tournament through the first couple of rounds, contributing goals and assists. I think if that stays the case and Ronaldo does his job as a number 9, which I think he is doing right now, I think he's played pretty well. This is going to be a difficult team to beat, I think.
The atmosphere there still seems like the party's going on, KJ. I'm hearing "We Will Rock You" by Queen. Oh, the irony. However, as we are talking Portugal and of course Cristiano Ronaldo, if there was any doubt that people loved him, KJ, was that put to bed in this game?
I'll tell you a story. On my journey here, we come through the media center and you walk up a ramp and you're with the fans a little bit. It's really nice. Unfortunately, a lot of the media entrances are very separated from the fans. So you actually have a general consensus going to some stadiums that you're like, oh, it doesn't actually feel like there's many fans here, but it's just a different entrance. I was walking up the ramp to come in today and a female fan was talking to whether a husband or a partner or whatever, and it's like, I can't believe I get to see Cristiano Ronaldo play. Do you know he's got more followers on Instagram than anybody in the world? And I was
very
like,
important.
That's an interesting way of describing it. It wasn't like, oh, Ronaldo's got this amazing ability as a footballer. And then it just set the tone a little bit. Like I've been here for 2 Argentine games, and I saw Brazil here. And Portugal don't have quite the fandom that they do. I mean, come along. It's a smaller country for one. So there are large pockets of Portuguese, and Uruguay, another small country. So tonight was a little bit more of a local crowd, certainly in the higher levels of the stand. And there were small. There was Portugal fans, there were Uruguay fans, and then there were tons of Ronaldo fans. And I'm telling you guys, the moment he gets the ball in deep positions, they scream. It's like this unbelievable screaming noise that you just don't hear at many other football games. And Jordan, as a footballer, I'll come to you. I was thinking at one point, I wonder how Ronaldo keeps his composure in these moments, because they're just screaming at the top of their lungs about this guy before he plays the pass. So it's a very unique atmosphere. And even though it's not all about Ronaldo, as Ollie and I alluded to in the first question on the pitch, trust me, in the stands, it is. And it's fascinating, Jordan.
Jordan knows what you're talking about. He's got them screaming fans when he touches the ball.
It's the same for me, KJ, at the CPL games. I'm like, stop, guys. Stop it.
It's just me, though, is the difference.
It's just me. It's just the same old Jordan. No,
Jordan
what I'll say about... I put it in the shin guard. What I'll say about CR7 is that he needs the people that hate on him to get him going, to keep him sharp. but he also needs the people that love him. He's that guy. I feel like when he's playing, he just absorbs it all. He's like, yes, I'm CR7. I'm handsome. I'm the most talked about player, or one of the most talked about players in the world. Guys look at me, look at my body. They know that I'm prime shape. He just feeds off of all of that. I would love to see him play. I would love to talk to him. So I wouldn't say that I'm fangirling the same way that Andy fangirled Ochoa, but I would say that seeing him and meeting him, I would probably scream. Like a squeal might come out if I met him.
That is too funny. You know, I actually had the privilege of talking to Ronaldo when Real Madrid came to play Toronto FC.
Yeah,
there was the friendly. So I did have the I didn't squeal. I managed to speak like a normal human being, but I can't imagine like that. When we talk about these footballers, there's a transcendence there, right? Like they go beyond the sport. There is a pop culture element to them, which is why they're just so widely popular. I mean, can you imagine every time I'd be flicking my hair? Like, yeah, that's me, which is why maybe it's probably best that I'm not in that position, because it would go right to this head and it doesn't take much for it to explode. But let's go to another player who's pretty popular. And that, of course, is Neymar, but we know he missed Brazil's game today. His foot, as we said, he put out photos there. It's injured, it's swollen, it's not good. They do walk away with the victory. Jordan 1-0 over Switzerland. Do you think they're still clear favorites without Neymar?
They're clear favorites, Andy. It's their tournament to lose. I will say in this game against Switzerland, you might have missed Neymar in moments, like a guy just to relieve pressure and to drive at the back four, or just to create something. But when you're having subs coming on like Rodrigo, Gabriel Jesus, Anthony, Tellez, like they have a plethora of options, ways to play. The only Achilles heel is they haven't had a shot really on them all tournament. So what happens if they go behind or if a team parks the bus? But I'm looking at this team. If you have to play them for 90 or potentially 120 minutes, the guys that are coming off the bench aren't just coming on to play and being at the same level of the guys that have played. They're offering so much extra. So for me, you really have to knock Brazil out for them not to be in a semifinal or final match. Like they have such depth within the squad and they can hurt you in so many ways.
Well, let's take a look at Group G standings here. Because this, of course, with Brazil defeating Switzerland 1-0. And then earlier in the day, Cameroon and Serbia played to a 3-3 draw. And that kept both of them alive to advance. But here's the thing. To have a chance of advancing, Cameroon will have to beat Brazil. Serbia will have to beat Switzerland. Ollie, I'll come to you first. And then KJ, I'd love to get your thoughts on this too. Can either of them do that?
You would certainly fancy Serbia more than Cameroon, I would imagine. Like Brazil have 6 points, so maybe there's a little bit of a let up there, and that lets Cameroon in and gives them an opportunity. But I think on paper, Serbia is the one who has the best chance. That won't be an easy game against Switzerland, so I think have shown they're a very well organized side. They've played in a lot of World Cups. Some of these players have played in a few major tournaments now, and they're never easy to beat. So Serbia, I do think there's some real upside there, though. We saw glimpses of it in this game this morning against Cameroon. There's some real attacking talent in this team, particularly the strikers, but also supporting players like Tadic, Milinkovic, Savic, and so on as well. So they're capable of winning that game. I'm hoping, that they'll make it a real contest against Switzerland and an exciting game. But they look like the one to me, KJ, who would be feeling better about their chances than Cameroon right now.
Yeah, Cameroon are done because they played Brazil. So, at least they had their moment. Right? I mean, that's every credit. They had their moment. And to come back from 2 goals down is not easy in a World Cup, regardless of the score, let alone being 3-1 down. So every credit to them. Just to pick up on a couple of different things that you boys both said. The one thing about Serbia is that there are a lot of people's like dark horse to go far in this tournament. You can't be shipping 2 goals to Cameroon when you're winning 3-1, and then suddenly, feel like that you can make a big run in this tournament. I would be very concerned defensively about the way that they're playing. They have to now show us in uncharted territory why they can be trusted. Switzerland have qualified, as Ollie said, a lot from groups for the last 4 major tournaments. They only need to get through with a draw. They're difficult to break down, as Brazil showed you today. It took a worldie from Casemiro to beat Switzerland in the 85th minute. And I'll just add this by this player too. I think he might be the most important player here in Qatar. Casemiro, because
Yeah,
he brings
he's been really good.
something to Brazil that they don't have. And everyone talks about Neymar being out and how they're going to replace Neymar. You lose that guy, he's irreplaceable. He's irreplaceable on the pitch and he's irreplaceable off the field. He's got that winning mentality that nobody else, I believe, has got, because he's done it and he knows how to do it and he knows how to be big, how to perform in big games. And that's the big question mark. I'll keep saying it until they show me how to do it in a big game. These young players, then I'll start believing it. But they're gonna have to get here at the stadium on the 18th. They're gonna have to show me. And he's the guy who they can rally behind, because he's done it and he's won Champions League and he knows what it's like. So he's a big part of that. But that Serbia-Switzerland game, it's going to be a big ask for the Serbians, because they got to go out there and win it. But if they do, look out. But yeah, what a fascinating day today. Lots of goals, and it was great to see Cameroon at least get their moment as you know, that they deserve, because I watched them in their first game and they can get forward a lot. They're a fun team to watch.
Well, speaking of a lot of goals, KJ, we did see that as well in Korea Republic and Ghana's game. 3-2 was the final. Ghana ended up winning it, but Ghana had the 2-0 lead before Korea bounced back to tie it 2-2. And then, of course, you know, the heartbreak for Korea, and that's Group H. So again, you know, just much like Group G, where Brazil sits on 6 points, Portugal sits on 6 points, but that second spot still up for grabs. But what did you make of that affair between Ghana and Korea Republic?
Well, it was a brilliant game to be at, a true World Cup game, because, you know, you've got two teams who never play each other, two teams from two different confederations, two teams with such different contrasting styles. You've got the technical quality of the South Koreans, who were so brilliant with the short passes, led by the masked man himself, you know, the superstar, you know, Son Heung-min. And then obviously you had the physicality, the directness of the Ghanaians, Partey playing in midfield tremendously. And, you know, they just had such a way about them that they went and had a swagger about them. They came back and got that third goal. As hard as it is, Jordan, when you're winning 2-0, when you give up that 2-goal lead, it's interesting to see what that mentality's like. And for them to go on and get it, you've seen the photo there of Paulo Bento getting a red card. That was because Anthony Taylor blew up for a final whistle just as his team got a corner, which is a little bit unsavory. But Jordan, you know, just the Ghanaian mentality was fantastic to see. And of course, now that 3 points puts them ahead of Uruguay. And there was all the talk in the stands, by the way, that they cannot wait for Suarez. They've been waiting for Suarez since 2010. And now they get that chance to have a go at Suarez and try and knock them out. So it was a massive victory for the Ghanaians, Jordan.
Every Ghanaian person I know has been waiting for this grudge match. They still talk about 2010. They would still want to chop off Luis Suarez's arm. Like this is a grudge match. I'm so glad it played out this way. When they were up 2-0, Ghana, I was watching the game like, this is comfortable. But again, the football mind in me, or having led 2-0 in games, it's the worst lead to have. A team scores 2-1, momentum shifts. You start panicking. You're looking at each other. Heads go down. 2-2. It's the worst thing possible. So for them as a team to rally together and come back and get that third goal, which was well deserved, but you need a bit of luck as well, right? I would say Williams, we'll call it a dummy, but trying to shoot on goal and it ends up going to Kudus for him to tap it in, slide it in for 3-2. It's perfect. But I cannot wait for this match because, as I said, Ghana is ready for Uruguay, and the only question is, will they get their revenge?
It's going to be one of the best matches, I think of the last round of fixtures. And Ghana are in a great position. They only need a draw if Portugal do them a favor against South Korea, obviously. So they're in a fantastic spot. They've been a lot better than I expected them to be based on, you know, looking at their form coming into the tournament. I believe it's the youngest squad in the tournament as well. So they've been a pleasant surprise, Ghana, and it would be nice to see them in the knockout stage.
Yeah,
I will say,
just a reminder. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to pat myself on the neck and say Ollie was looking at me silly, and Wheels, he's not here to back himself today, so I won't beat up on him too much. But I said Ghana to make it out of the group and Korea won't. And everyone's kind of looking at me like, is he crazy? I'm not crazy. My prophetic nature is coming back.
There you go.
Listen,
Uruguay dismissed.
Did you seriously just interrupt me to pat yourself on the back?
After 2 games,
a couple of times, and I'm sorry. Honestly, take it out of my tab, Andy. I owe you. I'll give you a 20 after the show.
But to remind people, 2010 World Cup, that was a quarterfinal match between Uruguay and Ghana. That went to penalties, and Uruguay walked away with the victory. It would have been really, massive for Ghana to advance to the semifinals as an African nation. So that's how important that game was. It ended up going to penalties. So yes, they've been waiting a long time. Even though this is coming in the group stage, we are very excited for this. Gentlemen, when we come back, we'll turn our attention once again to the Canadian squad. We know they have one more game to go, but we also know that they are officially eliminated. What are some of the questions we're asking around this squad and around the federation? Let's get to it on Good Night Qatar. Welcome back into Good Night Qatar. Andy, KJ, Ollie, Jordan with you. The Canadian men have one more game to go in the group stage. It's against Morocco. You can argue that it does mean something. It does mean something for Morocco. There is still a battle to move on to the next round in that group. You could also argue that it means something for the Canadians to get their first result. They would preferably love their first win at a World Cup and not have that hang over their heads as a storyline into 2026. But we know they're eliminated. At the end of the day, KJ, they're gone. And there are a lot of people, and rightfully so, feel proud of what this team has accomplished. But if you're going to call yourself a footballing nation, I could be in the minority here. That also means you have to start asking the tough questions, because when you're a footballing nation, you have hope, you have expectations. So the team is gone. They're gone after 2 games. In particular, I want to talk about the midfield. And do you think that that is a concern moving forward for this team, KJ? Because having to keep Atiba in because Eustachio came out when there were other midfielders on the bench, does that raise questions about depth at all?
Well, I mean, first of all, we're talking about midfield because it's the most important position. Right, Jordan? Yeah, of course it is. Jordan's going to agree with me. But, you don't win games unless you don't win games very often if you don't win midfields. So it's absolutely crucial. And that's why Stefan Eustachio is arguably one of the most important players in Canadian soccer history when it comes to this team, because he is so young and because his profile of as a player makes him so unique. So look, as I said yesterday, the midfield collapsed at the wrong time. Eustachio got hurt. Hutchinson couldn't go again because of how little fitness he'd had. And in the end, I think, as I alluded to, John Herdman didn't trust certain players to play in that big moment. And maybe that is respecting Croatia, when many people have accused the national team that they haven't respected them. Maybe he respected them by thinking he only had a certain amount of players that could play in that position. So it's a difficult one. I mean, Kone got his chance, Osorio got his chance as well. The other thing to say here is that the games come thick and fast here in Qatar. You have one less day off in between matches than you've had in the past World Cup. And there's an average amount, I just watched another team today in Korea, South Korea, there's an average amount of changes of 4 changes per team from game 1 to game 2. Canada decided not to make that many changes. And I think it showed. Ultimately, you can take that 2 different ways. One, you can play Monday morning quarterback and have a go at the coach because he didn't do it. Or 2, you can just say it's just down to the lack of top quality players that they trust at that level, right? So either way, that's probably another reason why it cost them in the end. Argue whether they should have played 4-4-2 is another thing. But Ollie, I think it's clear that at the highest level, they don't have too many midfielders right now that he can rely on to play in those big games.
No, that's the big kind of takeaway for me, and the conclusion I think that's hard to avoid based on the decisions that John Herdman made was that he looked behind him on that bench in the Croatia game, and there wasn't enough guys, certainly in central midfields, that he felt he could trust in that game against that kind of quality. And I think we've seen that. Like, we can talk about the players. I don't think it takes a genius to work out who those players are. Liam Fraser, I think, has kind of fallen off the radar of the national team a little bit since his move to Belgium. We know he's trying to rebuild his club career there, but he's not playing at the highest level. Marc-Anthony Kaye was fantastic in 2021. 2022 hasn't been the same, and we've seen his minutes with the national team decrease as a result. Sam Piette was probably the one we looked at and expected to play at this tournament, obviously much more than he has, which is not at all. But I think it was probably those Uruguay and Japan friendlies where I don't think Piette necessarily had 2 of his best games that called that into question a little bit in terms of his ability, particularly in possession, to cope with this level. So all of a sudden you're left with, a trio of midfielders, I think, that Herdman has judged to be usable in this tournament, where Eustáquio has played a ton of games for Porto and gets injured right before the tournament. Hutchinson has played one game for Besiktas and isn't fully fit. And then you have Ismail Kone, who this time last year wasn't a professional footballer. So that I think is going to be a big question coming out of this tournament. And it's a bigger question probably than we have time to get into in terms of development in this country and how we produce more midfield players going forwards here, leading into 2026 and beyond. But it's got to be a massive priority, because one of those three guys I just named is probably going to play his last game for Canada this week. So now all of a sudden you're down another one and down more depth in that area. So it's a big question, I think, when you talk about player development in this country going forwards.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to add one thing before Jordan says. Go ahead. I just wanted to say one thing.
No, you go.
The other thing I would say too is if this becomes a big problem going down the line, I would not rule out Alistair Johnson playing central midfield for Canada. Ooh, I'm telling you, he's played there before. He's played there before. He's one of the most intelligent players to play for Canada in a long time. It's nothing new to him. And we've seen the evolution of the fullback coming into central positions tactically, in and out of possession anyway. Philip Lahm's done it. I mean, Alistair Johnson's no Philip Lahm, but there are skill sets to do that. So maybe that's something in the future that they can seriously think about. They have right backs like Richie Larea, maybe Zach Rogiard, and others that can play in those positions. Again, it's just options going forward that I think they can think about. Jordan.
KJ, you never told me that you're a manager. You never told me you've been playing Football Manager on the side. KJ, keeping secrets. I would add to Alistair Johnson as well, KJ, that he has an engine, which is obviously crucial for playing in the engine room. Guy never stops running, never looks like he's out of energy. He's always given. So yeah, that's a great shout. The only thing I'll add to what the gentleman said was getting the balance right in the midfield is probably one of the hardest things a manager has to do. I would say what Ollie was going through all the players we have right now with Canada's squad, there are a lot of players that are similar. I think the difference is in quality, but getting the balance right of everyone talks about a 6 and their role, an 8, his role, and a 10 and what they do. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to balance. When you looked at the bench for Canada, no disrespect to guys, but to come on, it wasn't going to add to the game. It was going to disrupt the balance. If you had to keep Atiba on, playing a deep-lying midfielder, the guys who were coming out the bench, like a Piet, Mark-Anthony Kaye, they weren't guys really to go forward and maybe change the game. The one move that Herdman could make was playing Oso, who's a bit tactically sound, can make runs forward, and is like an 8/10. So I think he did the best with what he had.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I guess that's the big question. Did the best with what he had. So now moving forward, how do you make sure what you have is who you can also trust? It's not just your starting 11, but when games get tough, who can you bring in? So I feel like that's a question mark as well moving forward, because as you also alluded to, Ollie, we know Atiba's not going to be around for 2026. Right. KJ, we know Jonathan David can score goals. There's no denying that. The guy's great in Ligue 1. There's talk of him making a move to a higher league. There's been all kinds of rumors floating around about teams in the English Premier League interested in him. But he was quiet at this World Cup. Why do you think that is?
I don't know if he was quiet at the World Cup. I mean, I think he played really well against Belgium, guys. I just think he didn't get his chances. It didn't take his chances enough. He was heavily involved. I thought his movement was exceptional. Caused a lot of problems with the press. He makes intelligent runs. So, I thought he did fine. Look, the game against Croatia was just not built for Jonathan David. Ultimately, Canada couldn't keep the ball. And then Jonathan David is playing in a central area where he's required for service, and the service just didn't come. It wasn't like he's playing in a wide area where suddenly he can make those runs and get on the ball. Jonathan Osorio got on the ball more than David did, I think, and he played less, half a game. So I think that just goes to show you that he's struggling in that system at that moment. But I'm genuinely not concerned about him at all. Ollie, World Cups have swallowed up bigger names than playing number 9s than Jonathan David. It's just a major tournament, right? That's what happens sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think anyone needs to be concerned about Jonathan David individually as a player. What I would say is that I think sometimes, and I don't think the World Cup has been the first time with him, it does say something bigger, I think, about how this Team Canada plays and maybe some of their limitations as a team. Is that for me, this is still a team that's a team of moments. And we saw that through qualifying, where they can produce something out of nothing in transition, go from back to front in, under 5 seconds and score a spectacular goal. We saw Davies do that. We saw David do that. We saw a lot of examples of that in qualifying. And I think we saw it in the goal they scored against Croatia as well, very quickly back to front. What they don't do is they don't really control games for long periods. They don't really sit in the opposition half for long periods, impose themselves on teams for long periods. And that is something I think that's going to have to be an evolution of this team going into 2026. And that is when you're going to see the consistent threat of Jonathan Davids, being involved in the game, getting a lot of touches, as opposed to just producing those moments every now and then, because that's the kind of service he's getting. And really, that's all you can expect in that kind of team.
Well, let me jump back to you, KJ, and then Jordan, I'd love for you to chime. Saying that then, when we are looking at this game against Croatia, because I think we can all agree how they played against Belgium was exceptional. The world was walking away saying Canada should have gotten something from that game. It just wasn't meant to be. So we're really talking about this Croatia game where they desperately needed a draw in order to stay alive because of what happened between Morocco and Belgium and Morocco beating Belgium, and they didn't get it. Was this just, is it simple, KJ, to just say, listen, you're taking on Croatia, understand who you're taking on, they were going to win this game anyway, or are you going to be a little bit more critical and say, tactically, this should have been done?
Yeah, I think if we want to become that top nation, I think we should be allowed to dissect it. No, we should be allowed to do that. I understand there are moments, and there's there are other members of the media coming up to me today, quite often saying, hold your head up high, guys. You did well. Canada should be proud of the way you played. It's your first World Cup. You got your first goal. You went toe to toe with the semi-finalists. All of that. I think they're allowed to say that. They are perceiving our country differently than the four of us and people watching the show right now. Because if you're watching this show and you're with us, you're a hardcore fan of the sport in this country. And so I think we're allowed to have different conversations than they are. And I think that's now part of the next evolution of this team, right? That's what's happening everywhere else. That's what's happening in Brazil right now. They're on a 4-hour live post-game show debating whether they should play another midfielder. England's going crazy because they drew 0-0 against the US and the whole thing's falling down. So this is culture. This is football culture, right? This is what is going on. This is what it's about. So if I'm never going to say, no, we shouldn't talk more about it. Let's get on board, everybody. If you want to talk to me about should they play an extra midfielder against Croatia, I'm all for it. Let's have that debate. Let's talk about it. Systems and changes and tactics and players and staff within this country and within the CSA are going to have to get used to that. And they're going to have to get thicker skin, because that's part of becoming a soccer culture as well. And not everybody's right, but it's just about having that conversation and more people to go, this is what World Cups do, Ollie. This is what World Cups do. They bring people to the table to talk about this thing. This is an opportunity to have those conversations, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Of course, yeah. I think that's important, and I think that is growing in this country. And at the same time, I totally agree with what KJ says, but I will say at the same time, it's important for us to put it into context as well, right? That this was a team that has basically been pieced together over the last 2 years into a World Cup. And so it's not surprising that there's limitations there. It's not surprising that there's still a lot of areas for growth for this team. And it doesn't negate the job they've done just to get to this point. But, there's plenty of things you can look into that game and pick out tactically that I'm sure if they had it again, they might do it a little bit differently.
Jordan, as a player, I'm wondering how you're feeling. Because I do also feel that there's like a line. There's a line that can very easily be blurred where, yes, as fans and as a nation, you're very proud of what they've accomplished. But sometimes I feel like if you're a competitive person and people keep going, they're there, you did your best, it can also easily become patronizing. Like, how are you feeling right now if, put yourself in their shoes in that room?
Well, you teased me yesterday because my energy levels are low and I was sad. Well,
you were.
I was sad, genuinely sad. Friends on the team, just how well they've played. But I think that you embrace criticism. I think that's just a part of playing the sport, especially at a high level. These guys at a World Cup, people are saying now, it should fire something within their soul. Like they should feel like, man, we were that close to beating Belgium. If we tweaked a little bit against Croatia, it could have been a different outcome. To get a tip of it, I look at it, the analogy I look at is if you're a boxer, you want to box against the guy that can knock you out. Like, obviously, no one wants to get knocked out, but you want to box against the best. That's the way you
Challenge
learn.
yourself.
Like, I'm glad you want to challenge yourself. You want to be in the ring with the best. Canada faced Belgium. It could have taken it to them. And Croatia, it was a great lesson. I feel like that's a match to watch back and really dissect every 5 minutes and look at what could be different. But it's not patronizing. It's just taking it in for the moment and for what it is, that Canada's not there yet. But I guarantee you they will get there.
All right. Something else that was kind of created a little bit of a storyline there, KJ, and I know you were talking a bit about it on Twitter as well, as there were comments made about Alfonso Davies, who is the face of the team, who is the superstar here, not speaking to, non-rights holders, international media. And, there's been other players who have been doing just that. Why do you think it's important for, players to kind of go above and beyond with media commitments at these types of events? Like, we're talking the World Cup.
Well, that's the story, I think, that it's the World Cup. I'm not going to sit here and say we need you to do all these interviews all of the time. I think if I was advising them on him, I would just say that these conversations need to happen before things happen. In other words, you need to be anticipating things if things happen. So, for me, I would have hoped the conversation internally would have happened to say, the moment we score our goal, that player, guys, that's the moment that you're going to have to go in front of the media and you're going to do everything you could possibly have to do that night. Whether we win 1-0 or get smashed 8-1, you are the story that day, and we're going to put you there and you're going to have to do everything. So that, for me, I don't think that clearly has happened. I don't know, but that should be happening beforehand. That's what that you'd have to, it's part of leadership. You have to anticipate things before they happen. And then they're aware of it. So I'm not solely blaming Alfonso. But the reason why I think it's a big deal is because, first of all, I was there, and there was a lot of people questioning it. And it's not just Canadian media. I'll tell you who was there: Italians, Polish, American, French, English, Scots. I can go on and on. All from major tabloids, newspapers, and all wanting to get a quote from Germans, get a quote from Alfonso Davies. They weren't able to get it because he did the flash interviews. It's one thing to do the flash interviews. You are contractually obligated to do that, right? But I think it's just very important to tell those stories in those moments. And I thought it was a real missed opportunity for our game to not hear from him. And ultimately, again, he's a young man, and it's not solely his fault. But I think, guys, he's the face of our team now at 22. He's the future captain of Canada. And it cannot always just be Stephen Vittoria, Richie Larea, Alistair Johnston, and the same people coming out to talk all the time. Because you know what? That infuriates media a few times. Eventually, in my experience, you know who else that infuriates? The players. Yeah. They eventually say, I need you to do this as well. And so I just think it was a learning moment, and I'm not blaming him, but I think there's a lot to take there from a lot of people, Ollie.
Yeah, for sure. And look, it's a battle that journalists are never going to win in the court of public opinion, because journalists aren't very popular and professional footballers are very popular, right? So there's naturally an inclination to side with Alfonso. And I also sympathize with the fact that Alfonso does do a lot, right? From all the broadcast interviews that he has to do to, the partnerships that he's involved in and all the public appearances of any capacity that he has to make. It's a lot of things to do for someone who I don't think necessarily relishes it in my experience with Alfonso in terms of being stood in front of cameras and doing those things. So I get that, and I sympathize with him on that front. I would say though, and again, this is probably more for the people around him than for Alfonso himself, not to be too kind of over the top or grandiose about it, but he's just scored the first goal at a Men's World Cup in Canadian history. Like it's a moment in history for the sport in this country, right? You want to hear in that moment, what does he think? What's his reaction? What's he feeling? And I think it's a real shame that the traveling journalists who are there to document that and tell that story are not able to do so in something that would just take a few minutes. So that I think is a little bit of a shame and a little bit of a disappointment. But again, hopefully it's one of the many lessons we learn coming out of this World Cup.
It is a shame, Ali. I think it's your obligation as a player. Now, Alfonso Davies, a credible story that he has. Being 22, you think, man, I just want to play. I want to score a goal for my country. I want to go score a winning goal. Like these are things like as a player you think about, but you still have an obligation to your country to bridge the gap. So for me, he just has to. It's tough because you have to bite the bullet. Like now that you're a superstar, and now that you're in that stratosphere, and now that you're viewed as such, you have to be called on. It might not be your forte being talking in front of people about how you feel or about losses. It's not great, but understanding that you are the face of Canada, these are things that need to be addressed. You have to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, listen, it's a battle as old as time between media and the athletes, that's for sure. But it's also part of our industry. Like that kind of irks me a little bit if I can get something off my chest and he doesn't have to talk, she doesn't have to talk. Well, no, like it actually is how the industry works. Like we write about it, we broadcast it, we share their stories. That is literally how it works. And then you talk to them to make sure you get their side of the story as well, or any quotes from them. That is literally how the industry works. KJ, it was a blast having you on. Go get some sleep, my friend. That's Kristian Jack from Qatar. Ollie, Jordan,
Thanks,
you
guys.
have to stick around and do some work, gentlemen, because we're going to take a look at some of the other games. We're going to move ahead to tomorrow. We got some big matchups tomorrow. We're talking Iran, USA, England, Wales. Let's go. Let's talk Group B. Welcome back to Good Night Qatar. There's a look at Tuesday's schedule. We have ourselves a doozy of matchups. Really excited for these. We're going to focus in on one in particular at the moment, and that, of course, will be USA and Iran. I mean, this is a big match anyway for the group, but now we have controversy surrounding it as well. As you take a look at the standings here, the U.S. Soccer Federation, when promoting this game, removed that symbol in the middle there for Iran, which is on their flag. And it also sounds like that this was a U.S. Soccer Federation decision. It's not like they consulted with the U.S. government or with the players themselves. The players came under fire at a press conference by a lot of Iranian journalists. And one in particular is also citing Section 13 of a FIFA statute, which says any person who offends the dignity or integrity of a country or a person or group of people shall be sanctioned with a suspension lasting at least 10 matches. So it's Section 13 that prompted this tweet by posting a distorted image of the flag of the Islamic Republic of Iran on its official account. The U.S. football team breached FIFA's charter, for which a 10-game suspension is appropriate. And the penalty, should be such for Team USA, and they should be kicked out of the World Cup. This is very muddy, gentlemen. This is very, very muddy. Ollie, I just want to get your thoughts first on just what the U.S. Soccer Federation decided to do without consulting anybody.
Yeah, it's a massive blunder, isn't it? Like, I understand that we all, people want to show their support for what's happening in Iran right now. And I think we're all in, most of us in the Western world, you would imagine, are in the same place on that. And that's fine. I think we've seen a lot of this tournament of players and coaches expressing their opinions on these kinds of subjects and being asked very often about these kinds of subjects. But I thought, whoever's responsible for doing that, it's an incredibly irresponsible thing to do that puts your players and your coach, when they then have to go and face the media, in an incredibly difficult position. So there's ways of doing it in terms of, again, showing your support here, making a statement here. To just do something like this, where you're not even really acknowledging it, you're just putting this graphic out with an altered flag. I think it's incredibly irresponsible. It's something that, people don't really realize what their responsibility is when they're representing their country at a tournament like this, to act in the right way. So I think that was a real blunder. I'll just add to that, Tyler Adams and Greg Berhalter inevitably face questions on this in their press conference today. Tyler Adams in particular faced some pretty aggressive questioning from an Iranian journalist. I thought he handled it absolutely impeccably. Like, the United States have got their captain for the next decade there. I was so impressed with the way he spoke under some really difficult questions. So well done to him. But this is the kind of thing where, I don't know if it's someone operating a social media account or if it's someone higher in the US soccer PR staff, but it's a really dangerous thing to do, I think, for very little kind of gain or purpose, as far as I can see.
Yeah, there are other ways, obviously, that we see, players making or taking a stand, I should say. But Jordan, I'm curious, because this is where a lot of mudslinging comes in, right? Because nobody is perfect. And to your point there, Adams was asked about, like, hey, wait a second, we know what's going on in your country and the Black Lives Matter movement. So let's stop acting like, you're perfect. And this is what ends up happening, right? Everyone starts throwing stones, right? From glass houses here as well. And it can get really muddy here. And I understand that there are a lot of athletes who want to use their platform for good, who want to speak out. But then sometimes you can cross that line and it just becomes so distorted. Are you here to play? Are you here to make statements? Are you here to answer questions about politics and what's going on socially in certain countries? Are you here to play? It's just getting very muddy. And I just don't know where you are as well as an athlete, Jordan, on this.
$1 million question, Andy. I would say time and place. Like, you can have your views, you can have your beliefs, you could want to make your points and not offend certain people, but time and place. I'm sure everyone at the World Cup wants to advance their country and their team to the next round and win games. Like, so one shouldn't supersede the other. Like, if you're there as a player to play, like, that should be your priority number one. Now, we're obviously all human and everyone has their beliefs and things that they stand for. And I in no way am going to tell someone how they should believe or how they should think or how they should go about certain things. But I just know the World Cup happens every 4 years. You have a duty and an obligation to your country to represent them properly. And how you can do that best is on the pitch.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredibly difficult for some of these players. Like, just to add to that, like, if a player wants to express their opinions on these things, they're absolutely entitled to do that, and I've got no problem with doing that. But they're often sat behind, these microphones, put in the position of needing to be an expert on all of these different things. Like, Tyler Adams is 23 years old. Like, when I was 23 years old, like, I don't know if I would have been able to answer that question in a particularly convincing and compelling way, right? I probably would have panicked and thrown up. So, like, the way in which they handle these things, I think is, a lot of them are incredibly impressive. I'm not sure they should be put in that situation, but yeah, well done to them for handling it.
Well, let me just ask you this. Let's talk about the soccer. Quick little prediction here, Ollie, on how you think Iran USA is going to play out.
It's a really tough one to predict. I'm going to back our friends south of the border in the United States and say they pull through in this one and get the win they need.
Jordan?
I agree with you, Ollie. I think just off of their last performance, you can only judge a team by how they played last. And yeah, they have a lot to play for. They have everything to play for. So I'm going with the USA as well.
All right. Well, I can't wait, because when we come back on Good Night Qatar, we're going to talk England, Wales. This is where Ollie gets riled up. How does he feel about England's chances against the Welsh? Can they stay alive? We'll take a look at that matchup next. Welcome back to Good Night Qatar. This is the match I think a lot of people have been waiting for out in the United Kingdom. That would be England taking on Wales. The Welsh are still alive, by the way. They do have a chance to move on. Remember, they're at the World Cup for the first time since 1958, but they need a win. They desperately need a win. England just needs a draw in order to move on. It's a good little showdown here, Ollie. Can Wales actually pull off the unthinkable after seeing both these teams play? Who do you feel actually has the advantage? Not on paper. Do not tell me who on paper should be the better team. Based on the previous two matches in their group and what you've seen, how are you feeling?
I think England should be fine. It just depends how fine they are, right? Like, is it one where England kind of take control of this game and win it comfortably and bounce back from that performance against the United States? Or is it one that makes me a lot more nervous? I have a feeling it will probably be the latter because it's England's. But there is a big gap in quality between these two teams, and that's not just me being English saying that. I think when you look at the two squads, England's team is full of top Premier League players. Wales have players playing in, the second and third divisions of English football with quite a few players in their squad. So there is a massive gap here. But we also know that based on previous tournaments, this Welsh group has had a bit of a knack for performing way above expectations, for producing little miracles, for relying on guys like this, Aaron Ramsey and Gareth Bale, to come up with some really special moments. So if you're in a close game going into the latter stages, that's obviously what Wales will be targeting here. And then they'll be trying to get something out of one of those two guys. And it's not completely impossible that they will get it.
It's also worth noting, I know I make it sound simple, like Welsh just need to win and off they go. They not only need to win, but they will need a draw between USA and Iran. And they'll also just need to score some goals, big time, because of goal differential. So the stars really do need to align here for Wales, but our line, so you're saying there's a chance. Either way, it's going to be a good one. How about Group A, as we take a look at the group that kicked things off for us here at the World Cup? We already know the host nation, Qatar, is out. They joined South Africa as the only two host nations to not advance out of the group. So it'll be Ecuador versus Senegal. How about we talk about that one? And who do you favor, Jordan?
I'm so glad this match played out to be the last one and that the group played out this way, because these two teams are similar in the terms that they play bully ball and it's about to be a bloodbath. And midfielders like Kouyate for Senegal, also Caicedo for Ecuador. Man, the footballer in me is just gonna love seeing these guys go at it and battle, and they have everything to play for. Now, I'm gonna make a bold prediction. Wheel said Ecuador is going to go to round of 16, but Senegal get a win, they go round of 16. I'm going to say this could be not a dark horse to win it, but they could just cause a lot of chaos in this last round. They have nothing to lose. I back Senegal because losing your best player in Sadio Mane and rallying together and figuring out a new way to compete and be successful, I give them all the praise. And I said also on the show that when it comes to Black Stars or Senegal or any African team, I'm always rooting. I'm always trying to get a team back to the quarterfinals and potentially the semifinals. That has never been done before.
All right, well, why don't we have a little bit of fun of who we think is going to move on or go home? Who's going to be calling the reception desk in their hotel saying, extend my stay? Who is packing up the luggage? Let's have a little fun next year on Good Night Qatar. All right, gentlemen, normally your analysis, it's dead on. There's research behind it. You bring the heat. But here, without doing but if this happens in goal differential, if this happens, no, I want you to go from the heart. This final segment is strictly from the heart and how you're feeling. So don't come at my boys by saying, how can you say they're not going to move on because works in their favor? No, it's from the heart. Through or going home, USA, Ollie.
I don't have a heart. I have a list and I have scenarios and analytics to work out what's going on here. Well, this one is a bit from the heart because I just said it in the last segment, so I've got to stick to it now. USA is going through.
Jordan?
Oh. I think it's Iran, to be honest.
Iran.
There you go. Say that. Say it. All right. Now this one we already know. Through or going home. Senegal, Jordan.
I wish I knew the Senegalese national anthem because I would have sang it. But Senegal, baby. They're winning tomorrow.
Ollie?
I'm saying out. I got to go with Ecuador. I just think Mane might be the decider. The lack of Sadio Mane, that is.
In or out, Ollie? Mexico.
Mexico, I'm going out. I think Saudi Arabia have been good in this tournament. I'm not sure that Mexico would catch up the goal difference anyway, so I'm going to say outs for Mexico.
Mexico's out. They just haven't scored. They haven't looked dangerous. I don't see them picking it up for the last game.
Wait, is Costa Rica actually going to be the only CONCACAF team to probably move through? Because that would be bananas.
It's a bit of
that's on our list here.
Can we have that conversation at some point? Through or going home, Jordan, Australia?
Going home.
All
In. I think
In.
I think Denmark. I've been saying it for a while. I think Denmark's a little overrated here.
All right, Socceroos. Through or
Taking the
going
Aussies.
home, Germany.
Me, Germany. I think they're going to be in. They've been, I think, underrated a bit on the back of that Japan disaster. So I have Germany and Spain going
underrated?
through. Yes.
So Germany's going to beat out Costa Rica, perhaps?
Oh,
Okay.
Ollie, we usually agree. Germany is going home.
Ooh, that's a big prediction.
That's back.
Costa
Could you
Rica through?
imagine?
I got
Back to
I
back
got to
World
remember
Cups
all
where
of
they
them,
don't
right?
go through. Two more to
Costa
go
Rica or
here.
Japan.
Through or going home, Jordan, Belgium.
Belgium's going home. Belgium's already home with the chaos within their camp. They're home. They're not even they're home.
Yeah.
Bye, Belgium. Gone.
I'd say that they're on the beach, but it's not the end of the season. It's the middle of the season, so they're going back to their clubs. See you later.
One more.
I love it, Ollie.
Going through or going home, Switzerland.
I think Switzerland will be in. I hope Serbia put up a big fight and show some of their attacking quality, but I have a feeling Switzerland will do it.
KJ convinced me that Switzerland is hard to beat, and now I'm starting to see it. So I'm actually going to say that they're staying.
You know what's awesome? We're going to have some answers tomorrow. Very excited for that. Great stuff here tonight, gentlemen, on Good Night Qatar. Thank you to everybody for tuning on in. We'll see you again tomorrow.